So some part of you is already tired of performing. You don't need me to define the word. You feel it. The careful version of yourself you bring to the men you want. The one who laughs a half second after the joke instead of when it's actually funny. The one who laughs a half second after the joke instead of when it's actually funny. The one who waits the prescribed hours before texting back. The one who read somewhere that you should seem busy, seem unbothered, seem like a prize, and so you assembled yourself into the shape of a prize and held that shape until your face hurt. And here is the part that brought you to this video. Even if you couldn't have said it out loud, it works. That is the problem. The performance works often enough to keep you doing it, and every time it works, something in you dies a little because you know that whatever just got attracted, it wasn't you, it was the role. And a man falling for the role feels from the inside almost exactly like a man falling for someone else while you stand next to him watching. You have been getting love delivered to the wrong address for years. I want you to sit with how lonely that specific thing is, not the loneliness of being alone. You know that one. This is the other loneliness, the one nobody warns you about. The loneliness of being chosen for a version of yourself you had to manufacture, and then having to keep manufacturing her so the love won't stop. You want the game, and the prize was a second job. You have to wake up every day and be her again. And the man across the table thinks he knows you, and he is wrong. And you cannot tell him he is wrong without admitting what you did to make him stay. That is the quiet exhaustion underneath your dating life. That is the thing the advice never touches. Because the advice always assumes the goal is to win. Seem more confident. Play a little harder to get. Mirror his body language. Master the art of the pause. Every piece of it, every single piece, is more performance stacked on top of the performance that already isn't working. It is teaching you to be a better actress when the thing eating you alive is the acting itself. And the men worth keeping, here is what no one tells you. They can feel the performance, not consciously. A man cannot usually point to it. He cannot say to his friends, "She seems calibrated. She seems like she's running a strategy on me." He does not have the words, but his body has the words. Something in his nervous system registers that he is being managed, that there is a hand on a dial somewhere, that the woman in front of him is monitoring his reactions the way a pilot monitors a gauge, and it makes him restless in a way he cannot name. He pulls back and doesn't know why. He goes cool and calls it being busy. He tells himself the spark faded, when what actually happened is that some animal part of him sensed it was being handled, and no creature on earth relaxes while it's being handled. You have probably watched this happen and blamed yourself for not performing well enough. You went back and looked for the mistake. You replayed the conversation, hunting for the moment you came on too strong or not strong enough, texted too fast, too slow, said the wrong thing. You treated it like a technical failure, a bug in the execution. And so the lesson you took was, perform better next time. Tighten it up. Be more careful. You have been responding to the symptoms of performance with more performance. That is why nothing changes. That is why the smartest, most self-aware, most well-read women who have absorbed every piece of relationship content on the internet, often have the most baffling love lives. The intelligence goes into the performance. The better you get at the strategy, the further you get from the only thing that actually makes a man stay. Carl Jung understood why, and he understood it almost a century before anyone was filming videos about it. He spent his life studying the part of attraction that neither person can see, not the visible part, the flirting and the chemistry and the things you can describe to your friends afterward. The part underneath, the current running below the surface that decides, often in the first few minutes, whether two people will reach for each other or quietly drift. And what Jung found there was not a technique. It was almost the opposite of a technique. It was something that no amount of strategy can produce, and no amount of strategy can fake. And once you understand it, the entire framework you've been operating under will look like what it is. A way of working very hard to guarantee the exact outcome you're trying to avoid. Because Jung discovered that a man does not fall for the woman who flatters him. Read that again, because everything you've been taught points the other way. Make him feel good about himself, stroke his ego, laugh at his jokes, admire his ambition, build him up, and he'll associate that good feeling with you and he'll stay. It sounds right. It sounds like basic human nature. And it is completely catastrophically backwards. And the reason it's backwards is the single most useful thing you will learn this year. A man does not fall for the woman who flatters him. He falls for the woman in whose presence he finally meets himself, not the inflated self, not the version his ego defends in front of other men, the deeper one underneath, the one he barely admits exists, the one he has been quietly waiting his entire life for someone to see without flinching and without leaving. Every man you have ever met is carrying that hidden self around like a sealed letter he has never been able to hand to anyone. He has handed people the performance. He has handed them the resume, the confidence, the curated edges. But the letter stays sealed, because every time he came close to handing it over, the person in front of him was too busy performing back at him to receive it. Two performances facing each other. That is most relationships. Two people in costume, each waiting for the other to take the costume off first, and neither one ever does. And they call the resulting hollowness of personality difference and break up. When you stop performing, you become the first person in years who is actually available to receive what he's been carrying. And a man will burn his whole life down for that, not for flattery, for the specific, almost unbearable relief of being met. Here is the catch, and it is the catch. The entire industry of dating advice is built to hide from you, because there is no product to sell on the other side of it. You cannot fake being the woman who sees him. You cannot strategize your way into making a man feel met, because the only thing that lets you actually see him clearly is having stopped performing yourself. The performance is what blinds you. While you are managing your own image, monitoring how you're coming across, running the strategy, you have no attention left over to actually see the man in front of you. You are looking at the mirror, checking your own reflection in his eyes, and he can tell, because no one has ever been truly seen by a person who is checking their own reflection. So the secret to making a man fall deeply in love is not a thing you do to him. It is a thing that becomes possible when you stop doing things to him. And that is going to require something from you that no dating coach will ask for, because it is harder than any technique and it cannot be sold in 5 steps. It is going to require you to find out who you actually are underneath the woman you perform, and to be willing to bring her into the room, untested, unscripted, with no guarantee of how he'll react. It is going to require you to give up the one thing you've been clinging to your whole dating life, which is control. The illusion that if you just run the strategy precisely enough, you can guarantee the outcome. You can't. You never could. And the day you stop trying is the day you become magnetic in a way that no performed woman has ever been, because there is nothing in this world more rare or more attractive than a person who is not performing. This video is about how you get there. I am going to show you what a man is actually searching for, the thing he projects onto woman after woman and keeps not finding, so that you finally understand what you've been competing against and why the competition was never the other women. I'm going to show you why you learned to perform in the first place, because you did not come out of the womb calibrating yourself. Somebody taught you that being yourself was not safe, And until you find the moment they taught you, you will keep performing on autopilot no matter how many videos you watch. I am going to show you what collapses when you finally put the performance down. And I will not pretend it's painless, because it isn't. It feels like losing the only power you ever had. And then I am going to show you what happens on the other side. What changes in you? What changes in him? And why the woman who stops performing does not end up alone, which is the fear underneath all of this, but ends up wanted in a way the performer never was. But before any of that, you have to see the trap clearly. Not half see it, not nod along while secretly planning to keep performing just a little, just as backup, just in case. You have to see the whole shape of it, because a trap you can still half believe in is a trap you will walk back into the moment you get scared. So let's name it completely. The trap is the belief that love is something you earn through effort, that if you are good enough, careful enough, strategic enough, desirable enough, you can make a man love you. That love is a prize at the end of a performance, and your job is to perform well enough to win it. This belief feels like ambition. It feels like taking responsibility, like being proactive, like not leaving your love life to chance. It feels mature and adult and empowered. And it is the precise thing standing between you and everything you want. Because love is not a prize you win through performance. Love is what happens when two people stop performing at the same time. And you cannot make another person stop performing. You can only stop first and become safe enough that he dares to follow. Sit with how much that reframes. Every hour you have spent improving your performance was an hour spent getting better at the one thing that guarantees you'll never get what you actually want. You are not failing to win the game. You are winning a game whose prize is loneliness. The women you envied, the ones who seem to effortlessly attract devotion, the ones it never seemed to be work for, you assumed they were better at the performance. They were not better at the performance. Most of them weren't performing at all. That was the entire difference. You were watching them not perform and interpreting it as a more advanced technique, and then going home to practice your technique, getting further from the truth with every rep. This is why this is so hard to see. The answer looks like the absence of the thing you've been taught to add. It looks like doing less, like letting go, like a kind of surrender. And surrender is the one move that everything in you is screaming against, because surrender feels like the death of control, and control has felt for your entire dating life like the only thing keeping you safe. There were reasons you reached for control. We are going to honor those reasons, not bulldoze them. Somewhere along the way, you learned that the unperformed version of you was not enough, or not safe, or not lovable, and the performance was the intelligent response of a person trying to protect herself. It was not stupid. It was not weak. It was a survival strategy that worked well enough to keep using. And like all survival strategies that outlive their usefulness, it is now the thing strangling the very life it was built to protect. You do not put down a survival strategy by being told it's wrong. You put it down by finally feeling safe enough not to need it. And that safety does not come from a man. This is the part that will save you years. The safety you need in order to stop performing cannot be given to you by the man you're trying to attract. Because if you need his reassurance in order to stop performing, then you are still performing. You've just added a layer where you perform not performing while secretly monitoring whether it's working. He'll feel that too. The animal in him feels everything. The safety has to come from you, from a relationship with yourself solid enough that his reaction stops being the thing that determines your worth in real time. And building that is the actual work of this video, not learning what to say to him. Learning how to be so at home in yourself that what you say to him stops mattering nearly as much as the fact that, for once, a real person is saying it. That woman is in you right now. She is not someone you have to construct, which is a relief, because you are so tired of constructing. She is who you were before you learned to perform, plus everything you've survived since, minus the mask. She is underneath, and every man you want is, without knowing it, hoping she comes to the door instead of the woman you usually send. So we are going to go get her. We are going to go down before we go up, because that is the only direction that leads anywhere real. We are going to look at what he's truly searching for, and then at why you started performing, and then at the thing that has to fall apart before you can be free of it. It will not all feel good. Some of it will name things you've worked hard not to look at. But on the other side of it is the only version of love that has ever actually satisfied anyone. The kind where you are loved as yourself, which means the love finally reaches you instead of getting delivered one more time to a woman who was never really there. Stay with me. We start with him because you have been guessing about what he wants for your entire life, and you have been guessing wrong. And the truth is going to set down a weight you didn't even know you were carrying. Start with what he is not searching for, because you already think you know. And the thing you think you know and the thing you think you know is the whole error. You think he is searching for the best one, the most beautiful, the most impressive, the most accomplished, the one who checks the most boxes, the one whose value, totaled up like a score, beats the other women in the running. You think attraction is a competition and the prize goes to the highest number. So you have spent years trying to raise your number. Be prettier, be funnier, be more successful, be lower maintenance, be more desirable on paper, climb the ranking, win. And then you watched it not work. You watched men choose women who were, by every metric you'd been taught to optimize, beneath you, less attractive, less accomplished, less interesting by any honest accounting. And you did the thing everyone does. You decided he had bad taste, or low standards, or that she tricked him somehow. You filed it under his mistake so you wouldn't have to face what it was actually telling you. It was telling you the ranking is fake. There is no number. He was never scoring you against her. That entire frame, the one your whole strategy is built on, does not exist inside the mind of the man you're trying to win. He is not running the competition you've been training for. He is doing something else entirely, something you cannot see because you've never been taught to look for it. And the woman who beat you wasn't winning the competition. She was the only one not entered in it. So if it isn't the ranking, what is he actually doing? He is searching for a feeling, one specific feeling, and he has been searching for it his entire life, usually without any idea that he's searching, because it lives below the level he has words for. The feeling is recognition, the sense, rare and almost overwhelming when it arrives, of being seen all the way down and not turned away from, of someone looking past the performance he runs for the world, the competence, the composure, the strength he's been required to project since he was a small boy, who got taught that needing things made him weak, and meeting the one underneath, the one who is tired, the one who is not sure he's enough, the one who has been carrying it all alone and would rather die than admit how heavy it's gotten. Every man is two men, the one he shows and the one he hides. And he is not looking for a woman who admires the one he shows. He gets that everywhere. He gets it from colleagues, from strangers, from women running the exact playbook you've been running. Admiration of the shown self is cheap, and he knows it's cheap, because he knows the shown self is partly a fiction. So admiration of it never quite lands. It bounces off the surface it was aimed at. What he cannot get, What he has maybe never once gotten is for someone to see the hidden one and stay. That is the thing. That is what he is searching for. Not flattery of the mask, acceptance of the face under it. And now you can see why stroking his ego fails, why it has always failed, why the advice was poison dressed as sugar. The ego is the shown self. The ego is the mask. When you stroke his ego, you are praising the fiction. You are pouring admiration onto the exact surface. He already knows is a performance, which means every compliment you give the mask quietly confirms his deepest fear, that you've fallen for the act, that you don't see him at all, that if you ever met the man under the mask, you'd be disappointed and leave. Your flattery doesn't draw him closer. It tells him you're not safe. It tells him the mask has to stay on around you forever, and a man cannot fall in love with a woman he has to keep the mask on around. He can date her. He can sleep with her. He can even marry her. Plenty do, and live a quiet life of being admired by someone who never met him. But that is not the falling you're asking about. That is not deeply in love. That is two performances sharing a mortgage. Jung had a name for the deeper mechanism running underneath all of this, and you do not need the academic version. You need the part that changes how you walk into a room. He observed that every man carries inside him an image of woman that he did not consciously construct and cannot fully control. A kind of inner figure assembled out of his mother, his earliest experiences of being cared for or failed, his longings, his wounds, the parts of his own softness he wasn't allowed to keep, and so located in women instead. Jung called it the anima. You can call it the inner woman he's been looking for his whole life without knowing her face. And here is what matters for you. When a man meets a real woman who resonates with that inner image, the projection fires, and he experiences it as falling in love. The whole electric, destabilizing, can't stop thinking about her experience. That is the inner figure leaping onto the outer woman. That is what's actually happening when a man falls hard and fast and can't explain why. Now, most dating advice, the cheap kind, would take this and tell you to become his fantasy. Figure out his type, his inner image, and contort into it. More performance, the deepest performance of all, performing his own unconscious back at him. And it fails worse than anything because the projection cannot land and hold on a performance. It can flicker there for a moment, infatuation, the early high, but it cannot root because the unconscious is not stupid. It is in fact the least stupid part of him, and it can feel the difference between a real person and a woman shaped into a fantasy, the way you can feel the difference between sunlight and a heat lamp. The fantasy attracts and then curdles. You will probably live this. The man who fell fast and then pulled back just as fast, baffled, telling you it wasn't your fault. It wasn't a technique you got wrong. The projection landed on the performance, found no real person underneath to hold it, and recoiled. He didn't fall out of love with you. He fell out of love with a fantasy that he briefly mistook for you, and the moment the gap showed, the whole thing collapsed. What lets the projection land and stay is not matching his fantasy. It is being real enough, present enough, whole enough, that when his inner image leaps onto you, it finds an actual woman standing there to receive it. Not a screen showing him what he wants. A person, someone with her own center, her own life, her own weather, who is not arranging herself around his reaction. The projection needs solid ground to take root in. A performing woman is not solid ground. She is a surface, and projections slide off surfaces. A whole woman is ground, and things grow in ground. This is the reframe that should rearrange your whole understanding of why you've lost men you should have kept. you were a surface. You worked so hard to be the perfect surface, the flawless reflective screen showing each man his fantasy, and you could not understand why the love kept sliding off. It slid off because there was nowhere for it to sink in. You had performed away the one thing that holds love, which is the real you, the ground, the actual person. You optimized yourself into something could take root in, and a woman who beat you, the one with the lower number, she wasn't a better surface. She wasn't a surface at all. She was just there as herself, ordinary and real and not performing. And when his projection leapt, it found ground and it grew, and he called it love and meant it. And you stood there doing the math, and the math never had anything to do with it. Feel the relief in this, underneath the sting. You have been competing in a contest that doesn't exist, exhausting yourself optimizing a number nobody's reading, and the actual thing he wants is not something you have to manufacture or win or be better than other women at. It is something you already are underneath and have been hiding, because somewhere you got convinced that the real you was less attractive than the performed one. That belief is the lie this entire video exists to kill. The real you is not your weakness in the competition. The real you is the only thing that was ever going to work. There's a deeper layer here, and it cuts toward what you actually have to do. So stay with it even though it turns the lens back on you. You cannot offer a man recognition that you have not first offered yourself. You cannot receive his hidden self while you are hiding your own. The two are the same gesture. The capacity to see the man under his mask comes from the same place as the willingness to let your own mask drop, because both require you to be comfortable in the presence of the unperformed, the unpolished, the real. A woman terrified of her own hidden self, busy every second covering it, has no free attention to meet his. She is using all of it on herself. He feels met by exactly as much of you as you stopped hiding, and not 1 inch more. This is the law underneath the whole thing, and it is why no technique can ever fake it. The depth of recognition you can offer a man is capped precisely at the depth of self-acceptance you've reached. You can only see him as far down as you've been willing to go in yourself, which means the work was never really about him. It loops back every time. The reason you cannot make him feel seen is the same reason you exhaust yourself performing, the same reason his love keeps sliding off, the same reason you're watching this. You are hiding. And until you find out what you're hiding from and why, you will keep hiding on autopilot, and you will keep feeling the surface where a person should be, and the projection will keep sliding off, and you will keep blaming your technique. So we have to go to the root of the hiding. We have to find the moment you learned that being yourself was not safe, because you were not born performing. No infant calibrates. Somewhere a person who wanted love discovered that the real version of her got less of it than a managed version, and made the rational, self-protective, entirely understandable decision to start managing. That decision is still running. It is running right now in how you sit, how you text, how you brace before he responds. And it will keep running until you bring it into the light and see it for what it is, which is not a character flaw, but an old wound doing exactly what it was built to do. That is where we go next, down to the root, to the girl who learned to perform, and the moment she learned it, because she is still in there running the whole operation, and she cannot stop until someone finally tells her she's safe. You were not born performing. Hold on to that, because everything depends on it. There is no such thing as a baby managing her image. An infant cries when she's hungry, and laughs when she's delighted, and screams when she's furious, and none of it is strategy, None of it is calibrated. All of it is pure, unedited transmission of whatever is true in that moment. That was you. That is the factory setting. Total, shameless, unperformed realness, broadcasting at full volume, with no concept yet that the self could be a liability. So performance is not your nature. Performance is a scar. And scars form in a specific place, at a specific moment, in response to a specific wound, which means yours has a location and a history, and we're going to go find it. Because a wound you can see is a wound that can finally close, and a wound you can't see runs your life from the dark. Here's how the scar forms, and see if the shape of it feels familiar, even before the details do. There was a moment, or more likely 1,000 small moments that added up to one lesson when you were fully yourself, broadcasting at full volume, and the broadcast got punished. Not always with cruelty, often with something quieter and more devastating than cruelty. You were too much, and a face you loved went tight. You needed something, and the need made the room colder. You were loud, you were big, you were openly delighted or openly upset, and you watched the people whose love you depended on for your literal survival pull back just slightly, just enough. And in that pullback, your small nervous system learned the most important and most poisonous lesson of your early life. The real you costs love. The real you is too much, or not enough, or wrong somehow. And if you want to keep the love, which you must, because you will not survive without it, you are going to have to manage what you show. That is the birth of the performer, not vanity, not weakness. A child correctly reading her environment and adapting to survive it. The performance was intelligent. It was the right answer to the question her childhood was asking, which was, what do I have to become to keep them from pulling away? She found the answer and she became it, and the becoming saved her, and that is exactly why it's so hard to put down now. You don't easily release the thing that once kept you alive. For some of you, it was a parent who only warmed up when you achieved. Love arrived attached to the report card, the recital, the win, and was strangely absent the rest of the time. So you learned that the real you, the one just existing without producing anything, wasn't enough to earn the warmth. You had to perform value. And now you walk into every room, including every date, unconsciously performing value, listing your accomplishments, demonstrating your worth. Exhausted, never understanding why being impressive keeps failing to make anyone stay, because impressive was always the performance, and the man underneath his own mask is not looking to be impressed. He's looking to be met, and you forgot how to be met somewhere around age 7. For some of you, it was a parent whose moods were weather, and you became a meteorologist. You learned to read the smallest shifts, to manage the room, to become whatever would keep the storm from breaking, to make yourself small or bright or quiet or entertaining, depending on what the atmosphere required. You became exquisitely attuned to everyone else and completely disconnected from yourself, because your safety depended on tracking them, not you, and now you do this with men automatically. You walk in already scanning, already adjusting, already becoming what you sense he wants, and you call it being intuitive or being easygoing. But it isn't ease, it's vigilance. It's the meteorologist still on duty decades later, and he can feel the radar running even if he can't name it. For some of you it was more obvious. Love that was conditional and said so. A parent who withdrew affection as discipline, who made you understand that you were lovable when compliant and unlovable when not, who trained you that your true feelings, especially the inconvenient ones, the anger, the need, the no, were threats to the connection you couldn't afford to lose. So you buried them, You became agreeable. You became the one who's no trouble. And now you cannot say no to a man to save your life. You cannot express a real need without your whole body bracing for abandonment. You perform an easy, undemanding, low-maintenance woman because some part of you still believes that the moment you become inconvenient, the love ends, the way it always ended. You know which one is yours. You felt it land while I was talking. There's a particular sentence in here that hit somewhere you don't usually let things reach, and that one is the door. I want you to understand what's so cruel about this mechanism, because the cruelty is the whole reason it's lasted, and naming it is part of how it loosens. The performance was built to get you love. That was its entire purpose. The child constructed it as a strategy for staying connected to the people she needed. But here is the trap that snaps shut behind her. The performance can only ever get love for the performance. It is structurally incapable of getting love for you because you are the very thing it's hiding. So the better it works, the more love it pulls in, the more abandoned the real you becomes, because she is watching the love pour in and land on someone else, on the constructed one, on the mask, while she sits behind it, unseen, unmet, starving in the middle of a feast. That is the loneliness from movement one. Now you know where it was born. You have been recreating your original wound, your entire adult life. You go out, you perform, the performance attracts, and you end up exactly where you started, love for a self that isn't you, which is the precise condition that made you start performing in the first place. The strategy that was supposed to solve the wound is the thing that keeps reopening it. You are not failing to escape the pattern. You are succeeding at running it flawlessly, the way you were trained to. And no man can fix this for you, which is the hope you have to grieve before we go on. Some part of you has been waiting for the man who loves you so well, so completely, so unconditionally, that he heals this from the outside, who sees through the performance to the real you, and chooses her so decisively that you finally feel safe enough to drop the act. It is a beautiful fantasy, and it cannot happen for a reason that is almost mathematical. He cannot see through to the real you because you are not showing her. You are showing him the performance expertly, the way you show everyone, and then waiting for him to see past it. But there is no past it. From his side, there is only the surface you're presenting. And he falls for that or he doesn't. And either way, the real you stays hidden, still waiting, still betting on rescue from a man who was never given anything real to rescue. The rescue has to be an inside job. The girl who learned to perform is still in there, and she is still scared, and she is still running the whole operation on the same logic she set down decades ago, that the real you is dangerous and must be managed. She has never been told otherwise. No one has gone down to her and said, "It's over, the danger has passed. You are an adult now. The people who pulled away don't run your life anymore. You can come out." Until somebody tells her that, and the only somebody who can is you, she will keep the mask welded on, because as far as she knows, the mask is the only thing standing between you and the unbearable thing that happened when you were small and real and got left. So the work of dropping the performance is not really a dating skill. It is going back down to her. It is the adult you, the one who survived, the one who is safe now, whether or not she feels it, turning around and finally facing the child, still frozen at the moment love got withdrawn, and giving her what no one gave her then: permission to exist as herself. Proof that this time, being real, does not end the love. You cannot get that proof from a man until you've started giving it to yourself, because the man only ever meets whoever you send to the door, and right now you keep sending her the performer, the bodyguard, the meteorologist, the easy, agreeable one, while the real you hides in the back of the house, listening, hoping, never quite daring to walk out. We're going to get her out, But first, you have to see her costumes clearly, because the masks aren't abstract. They have specific shapes, and yours has a shape you slip into, so automatically you stop noticing it's not your face. Naming the exact mask you wear is how you catch yourself in the act, in real time, on the actual date, in the actual moment your hand reaches up to put it on. And you cannot stop a reflex you can't see. So next we make it visible. We name the roles one by one, and the specific way each one murders the very intimacy it was built to protect. The mask has a shape, and yours is so familiar to you that you stop seeing it as a mask at all. You think it's your personality. You think it's just how you are. That's what makes it dangerous. A mask you know you're wearing, you can take off. A mask you've mistaken for your face, you defend. So we are going to name them, the specific roles, and as I describe each one, watch for the flush of recognition, the slight defensiveness, the urge to say, well, that one's not a mask, that one's actually me. That urge is the tell. That's the one you wear. The first is the tell. That's the one you wear. The first is the easy one. She is never any trouble. She is low maintenance, drama-free, up for anything. The woman who prides herself on not being like other women, the ones who need things, who have demands, who make scenes. She orders what he's having. She's fine with whatever. She laughs off the things that hurt her and apologizes for the things that aren't her fault and shrinks her needs down to a size she's decided is acceptable, which is usually invisible. And she believes, she truly believes, that this is what makes her desirable, that her lack of needs is her selling point, that a man will love her precisely because she asks for so little. Here is what she costs you. A man cannot fall deeply in love with a woman who has no needs, because a woman with no needs has no self, and you cannot love a self that isn't there. Needs are not the obstacle to intimacy. Needs are the doorway. When you tell a man what you actually want, what hurts you, what you will and won't accept, you are handing him a real person to relate to, with edges and a center and an inner life. The easy one hands him a smooth, blank surface that agrees with everything, and a man drifts away from that surface, not because she's too demanding, but because there's nothing there to hold on to. He cannot get a grip on a woman who has sanded off everything that makes her graspable. He calls it the spark fading. What faded was never there. You can't have a spark with a person who's hidden the entire person. The easy one thinks her needlessness is a gift to him. It's actually a wall, the politest wall ever built, and she stands behind it wondering why no one ever reaches her. The second is the impressive one. She leads with the resume. She is accomplished, and she makes sure you know it, not crudely. She's too smart for crude, but it's woven through everything, the career, the credentials, the interesting life, the carefully demonstrated value. She learned somewhere that love comes attached to achievement, that she is worth keeping when she's producing something worth admiring. And so she performs worth, relentlessly, exhaustingly, on every date, listing reasons she's a catch. Here is what she cost you. Admiration is not love, and the man can feel the difference, even when she can't. When you perform impressiveness, you are asking him to admire you, and admiration creates distance. It puts you on a pedestal, and no one is intimate with a statue. Worse, the relentless display of value broadcasts the exact opposite of what she intends. It broadcasts that she doesn't believe she's enough, as she is, that she has to earn her place, that her worth is conditional. And she's terrified you'll discover the unimpressive person underneath the achievements. He doesn't experience her as high value. He experiences her as anxious, as working too hard, as someone who has never once relaxed into simply being wanted for existing. The truly magnetic woman doesn't perform her value. She assumes it quietly and lets him discover it. And the difference between performing worth and assuming it is the difference between a woman he admires from a distance and a woman he cannot stop moving toward. The third is the mirror. She is whatever he wants. She reads him in the first 10 minutes and becomes the complement, mirrors his energy, shares his interests, agrees with his takes, laughs at his rhythm, shapeshifts so smoothly that he feels intoxicatingly like he's found someone who just gets him, who's perfectly aligned, who likes all the same things. She calls this connection. She calls it chemistry. It's neither. It's erasure performed as intimacy. Here is what she cost you, and it's the cruelest cost of all the masks. The mirror creates the most intense early infatuation and the fastest, most baffling collapse. He falls hard, fast, because being mirrored feels like being deeply understood, feels like the recognition he's been hunting his whole life, and then it curdles because there's no one there. He reached for the woman who understood him, and his hand closed on his own reflection. The projection landed and found nothing underneath to hold it, exactly as we said. And the mirror, devastated, replays it endlessly, certain she did everything right. Because she did do everything right, she matched him perfectly, and perfect matching is precisely the problem. He didn't want a reflection. He wanted to be met by an other, a real separate person with her own center who chose to come close and instead got a surface showing him himself. And after the high wore off, that surface felt like being alone in a room full of mirrors. The mirror's tragedy is that she's so good at attracting and so structurally incapable of keeping. And she never figures out why, because the better she gets at the only thing she knows how to do, the worse her results get. The fourth is the cool girl, and she's the one the modern advice built. She is unbothered. She has read the strategy and she runs it cold. The measured texts, the calculated unavailability, the studied indifference, the refusal to seem too interested. She has weaponized attachment because someone told her that wanting is weakness, that the one who cares less wins, that the way to a man's devotion is to seem like you could take him or leave him. So she performs not caring, and she's good at it. And she mistakes the performance of indifference for actual self-possession. Here is what she costs you. The cool girl confuses two things that look identical from the outside and are opposite underneath: genuine self-possession and performed indifference. Real self-possession is warm. It's a woman so secure in herself that she can be openly, vulnerably interested in a man without it threatening her center, because her worth doesn't hang on his response. Performed indifference is cold, and it's not strength. It's fear in a costume. A woman so terrified of rejection that she's pre-rejecting him, hiding her interest so it can't be wounded. And the man feels the difference. The secure woman draws him in because she is available and unthreatened. The cool girl pushes him away while telling herself she's reeling him in, and the men she does catch are the ones drawn to the chase itself. The unavailability who lose interest the moment she warms up, because the coldness was the whole attraction, and now she has to stay cold forever to keep him, which means she signed up to perform indifference toward the person she most wants to be close to. The cool girl wins the game and loses the entire point of having played. There are others, the caretaker who makes herself indispensable so she can't be left, the fixer who collects broken men so she's always needed, the entertainer who never lets a silence fall because silence is where she might be seen. But they all run the same engine underneath, and now that you've watched 4 of them, you can see the engine plainly. Every mask is a strategy for getting love without the risk of being seen. That's the unifying logic. Each one is an attempt to solve the same impossible equation. How do I get him to choose me without showing him the me I'm afraid he'll reject? And the equation has no solution. That's the thing. It cannot be solved, because the only thing that produces the love you actually want is the very showing the mask exists to prevent. Every mask is a bet that you can have intimacy without exposure, and that bet always loses, because intimacy is exposure. There is no other kind. So here's what I need you to do, and it's uncomfortable, which is how you'll know it's real. I need you to identify yours, not intellectually. I need you to feel which one made you defensive. Go back through the four: the easy one, the impressive one, the mirror, the cool girl. One of them you read and thought, with a little heat, that's not a mask, that's just good sense, that's just who I am, that one actually works. Whichever one you defended is the one welded most tightly to your face. Because we don't defend our masks when we see them clearly. We defend the ones we're still mistaking for ourselves. And once you can name it, something changes that no amount of theory could give you. You start catching yourself. You're on a date and you feel the easy one reaching for the words, "It's fine," when something is not fine. And for the first time there's a gap, a half second of awareness where you notice the mask coming up before it locks into place. You feel the impressive one start to list your accomplishments, and you catch the reach. You feel the mirror start to dissolve into his preferences, and you notice you're disappearing. That half second of noticing is everything. That's where freedom lives. You can't stop a reflex. You can't see. But the moment you can see it, it stops being a reflex and starts being a choice, and a choice you can make differently. But seeing it isn't the same as being able to stop it. And I won't pretend it is, because the mask is load-bearing. It's holding up a structure, and the structure is your entire sense of how to be safe with another person. And you cannot just remove a load-bearing wall and expect the house to stand. Something has to happen first. The strategy has to fail completely, has to fail in a way you can't explain away or patch or blame on bad luck, has to back you into the corner where the old way is so visibly, undeniably broken that putting the mask down stops feeling like a risk and starts feeling like the only door left. That failure is coming. For many of you, it's already here. It's why you're watching. It's the collapse. The moment the performance stops working, no matter how well you run it. And that collapse, which feels like the worst thing, like proof that you're unlovable, like the floor falling out, is actually the most important thing that will ever happen to your love life. Because it's the only thing strong enough to make you finally put the mask down. So that's where we go next. Into the collapse. Into the collapse. Into the failure that frees you. Movement 5, the collapse. There comes a day when the performance stops working and you cannot understand why, because you are running it better than you ever have. That's the part that breaks you, not that it fails. Things fail. But that it fails when you've perfected it, you've done everything right. You've read everything, refined everything. You are more polished, more calibrated, more strategically flawless than you've ever been. And it is producing nothing. Or worse, it's producing the same hollow result it always did. The men who fall for the mask and drift from the woman. And you finally run out of road for pretending the next refinement will fix it. The strategy has reached its ceiling. And the ceiling is so much lower than the life you wanted, and you are standing under it realizing this is as good as the performance gets, and it was never going to be enough. For some of you, the collapse is a specific man, the one who got close enough that the stakes were real, and you ran the whole playbook on him perfectly and watched it fail anyway, or watched it succeed in the worst way. Watched him fall for the performed you and felt the familiar horror of being chosen in absentia, loved while invisible, and something in you finally refused to do it one more time. You couldn't perform your way through another relationship with someone who'd never met you. The thought of years of it, decades of it, maintaining the mask through a marriage, through children, growing old beside a man who married a woman you made up, became unbearable in a way it hadn't been before. For some of you, it's quieter and worse. No single man, no dramatic ending, just a slow accumulating exhaustion that one day crosses a line. You're getting ready for a date, doing the thing you've done 1,000 times, assembling her, the performed one, choosing the outfit she'd wear and the stories she'd tell and the energy she'd bring, and you catch your own eyes in the mirror and you just stop because you realize you cannot do it again. Not won't, can't. Something has run out. The fuel that powered the performance for all these years, the hope that this time it would finally get you the real thing, has finally, completely run dry. And without that hope, you cannot lift the mask to your face. It's too heavy. It was always this heavy. And the hope was the only thing making it liftable. This is the dark night transposed into the key of love. And I will not lie to you about what it feels like from the inside, because the lie is what makes people run from it back into the performance. It feels like failure. It feels like proof of the thing you feared your whole life, that you are fundamentally unlovable, that everyone else got handed some basic capacity for love that you were born without, that you've been faking your way around a hole in you, and the faking has finally stopped working, and now the hole is just visible. It feels like the floor is gone. It feels often like there's no point, like you've been trying your entire adult life and you're further from love than when you started, and the performed version was at least getting you something, and now you can't even do that. Stay in the discomfort of this with me, because here's the thing nobody going through it can see. The thing you can only see from the other side, or from someone who's standing on the other side telling you. This collapse is not your love life failing. This collapse is your love life's intelligence finally asserting itself over your love life's strategy. Something in you, something deeper and wiser than the performer, has decided it will no longer participate in getting you the wrong thing. It has withdrawn its cooperation from the performance. That's why the performance suddenly doesn't work, why the fuel ran out, why you can't lift the mask. It's not that you've lost the ability. It's that the deepest part of you has gone on strike, has refused to keep helping you build a life of being loved in absentia, because some part of you would genuinely rather have nothing, rather be alone, rather face the terrifying void of no strategy at all, than spend one more year being chosen for a woman who isn't you. That refusal is the healthiest thing about you. It is the part that's going to save you finally surfacing, and it surfaces wearing the mask of catastrophe because that's the only way it could get your attention. You would never have put the performance down voluntarily. It worked too well, it was too load-bearing, you were too scared. The only thing that could make you drop it was for it to stop working so completely that holding on became more painful than letting go. And so the deepest part of you engineered exactly that. It broke the strategy on purpose. It made the mask too heavy to lift, not to punish you, to free you, because it could see what your conscious mind could not, that the path you were on led nowhere you actually wanted to go, and the only way off it was a collapse total enough to leave you no choice but to find another way. This is the same thing the sample script was pointing at, the breakdown that's actually a breakthrough, the death that precedes the rebirth. Except here it's specific, it's not abstract spiritual collapse. It's the precise death of a specific strategy for getting love. And the rebirth on the other side is specific too. It's the birth of a woman who no longer needs the strategy because she's finally going to risk being real. But you're not at the rebirth yet. You're in the collapse. And the collapse has a particular danger. The same danger the sample warned about, the premature rescue. This is where most women turn back, and I need you to see the exits clearly so you don't take one, because every exit leads straight back into the maze. The first exit is a new performance. You decide the problem was the specific mask, not masking itself, and you simply switch masks. You were the easy one and it failed, so you become the cool girl. You were the impressive one, so you try being the mirror. You experience this as growth, as finally figuring it out, as a fresh start. And it's nothing of the kind. It's the same prison with the wallpaper changed, and in 6 months or a year, you'll be standing in front of the same mirror, feeling the same exhaustion, having learned nothing except a new costume. The second exit is bitterness, and it's the most tempting because it feels like wisdom. You decide the whole thing is rigged, that men are shallow, that love is a fairy tale, that you're done, that you'll focus on yourself and your career and your friends and stop caring, and you armor yourself in a cynicism that protects you from ever having to risk being real again. And the cruel part is, it works. The armor does keep you safe. It keeps the pain out. It also keeps everything else out, every chance at the love you actually wanted. And you spend the rest of your life mistaking a wound for a worldview, calling your fear maturity, growing old behind a wall you built in a single bad season and then defended forever. The third exit is collapse into someone, anyone, the rebound, the rush into a new relationship before the old self has finished dying, grabbing the first man who'll have you, because the void is unbearable and a warm body in it is better than the emptiness. And you bring the undead performance straight into the new relationship and recreate the whole pattern with a new face. And now you're trapped because you've built something real. A relationship, maybe a life, on top of a self that never got to die and be reborn. And unwinding it later will cost 10 times what facing the void now would have cost. Every exit is an escape from the one thing that could free you, which is staying. Staying in the collapse. Staying in the void. Not fixing it, not numbing it, not switching strategies or building armor or grabbing a rebound, but staying in the unbearable open space where the old way is dead and the new way hasn't been born, and letting yourself be there, undefended, with no strategy, no mask, no plan, until something new can come. That staying is the hardest thing this video will ask of you, harder than any technique. And it asks you to do the one thing every instinct screams against, which is to do nothing, to not reach for the next fix, to sit in the fire and let it burn off what's false. The sample called it staying in the vessel, not breaking the container, not jumping out before the process completes. Same thing here. The collapse of your performance is the heat, and the temptation to grab a new strategy is the urge to break the vessel and escape the heat. And if you escape it, you stay lead forever. And if you stay in it, something happens that cannot happen any other way. What happens is you find out you survive it. That's the turn. That's the thing on the other side of staying. You sit in the void you were terrified of. The one you spent your whole life performing to avoid. The one your childhood taught you would destroy you, and it does not destroy you. You're still here. The unbearable thing turns out to be bearable. The real you, the one with no strategy, the one you were certain no one could love, the one you've kept hidden since you were small, turns out to be someone you can survive being. The performance always told you that without it you'd be annihilated, unlovable, nothing. And here you are, without it, in the wreckage of it, and you are not annihilated. You're frightened, you're raw, you're more naked than you've ever let yourself be. But you exist. The self the mask was protecting turns out not to need protecting. It was never as fragile as the terrified child believed. It was just never given a chance to find out it could stand on its own. And the moment you discover that, the entire foundation of the performance cracks, because the performance was built on a single belief that the real you cannot survive being seen, and you've just survived being seen by the only person whose verdict was ever going to free you, yourself. You looked at the unperformed you, the one with nothing to offer but her actual self, and you did not turn away. For the first time, someone met her and stayed, and it was you. That's not the end of the work. It's the beginning of the only part that matters, because surviving the collapse is not the same as choosing on purpose in the daylight with a real man in front of you to put the mask down and stay down. The collapse took the mask off by force. Now you have to decide to keep it off freely, and that's a different act, a deliberate one, a surrender you choose rather than one that's done to you. That choice is where we go next. Not the collapse of the strategy, but the conscious laying down of it, the surrender. The moment you stop performing, not because you can't anymore, but because you finally understand you were never going to get what you wanted any other way. The collapse takes the mask off by force. Surrender is when you decide to keep it off on purpose. And those are two completely different acts. And the second one is the one that frees you, because anything done to you can be undone by the next wave of fear. But what you choose with your eyes open belongs to you. Here is the difference, and feel how much rides on it. In the collapse, you stopped performing because you ran out of fuel, because the mask got too heavy, because something broke. You were passive. It happened to you. And the danger of anything that merely happens to you is that when your strength returns, when the fear comes back up, when a man you want appears and your heart starts pounding and every old instinct floods back, you will reach for the mask again, automatically, because you never decided to put it down. It just fell, and a thing that falls can be picked back up. Surrender is picking it up, feeling its full weight in your hands, understanding exactly what it's cost you, and setting it down deliberately, choosing the bareness, choosing to walk into the room as yourself, not because you've been stripped of the choice, but because you've finally seen that the mask was never protecting you. It was only ever protecting you from the love you actually wanted. And I have to be honest with you about what surrender feels like, because the word sounds peaceful, and it is not peaceful. It is the most frightening thing you will ever choose. Surrender feels like walking into the room naked. It feels like handing a man the sealed letter, your real self, with no idea whether he'll read it tenderly or laugh or hand it back. It feels like giving up the one thing you've clung to your whole dating life, which is control. The illusion that if you just run the strategy precisely enough, you can guarantee he won't leave. Surrender is releasing that illusion. It's admitting you cannot guarantee anything, that you never could, that the control was always fake, and that the only love worth having is the kind you can't control your way into, the kind that has to be freely given to the real you, or it isn't worth having at all. This is why everything in you fights it. Surrender feels like death because it is a death. The death of the controller. The death of the part of you that believed she could engineer love if she just got good enough at the performance. That part has run your love life since you were a child. She built the masks. She kept you safe. And now you're asking her to step aside and let the unprotected real you walk into the most dangerous arena there is, intimacy, with no armor, no strategy, no guarantee. Of course she's screaming. She thinks she's watching you walk to your death. She doesn't understand yet that the thing she's been protecting was never as fragile as she believed, and that her protection was the actual cause of the loneliness she was trying to prevent. So surrender is not giving up. Burn that confusion out of your head right now, because the word trips people. Surrender is not resignation, not defeat, not lying down and accepting whatever scraps come. Surrender is giving in to something larger than the controller's agenda. It's trusting a process you can't see the end of. It's the most active passivity there is. A deliberate, courageous, eyes-open choice to stop forcing and start allowing, to stop manufacturing love and start becoming available to it. The controller thinks the opposite of control is chaos. It isn't. The opposite of control is trust. And trust is the soil that real love grows in, and you cannot fake trust any more than you can fake the realness underneath it. What exactly are you surrendering? Let's make it concrete, because abstract surrender is just another idea to perform. You're surrendering the outcome. You walk into the date and you let go of needing it to go a particular way, needing him to like you, needing this to become something. Not because you don't care, but because the needing was the performance's engine, the thing that made you monitor and adjust and manage. When you release the outcome, you get your attention back. All that energy you were spending tracking his reaction, calculating your next move, managing your image, comes flooding back into the room. And for the first time, you can actually see the man in front of you, actually be there, actually present, because you're no longer half absent running the strategy in your head. You're surrendering the timeline. The controller has a schedule, has decided when things should happen, is always measuring this man against where he's supposed to be, is anxious, is pushing, is reading every delay as failure. Surrender means letting it unfold at its own pace, trusting that what's real doesn't need to be rushed and what needs rushing was never real. The sample called this the shift from the ego's agenda to the self's rhythm. And it lands exactly here, in dating, in the difference between forcing a connection onto your timeline and letting a real one find its own. You're surrendering the verdict on yourself. This is the deepest one. You're surrendering the belief that his response decides your worth. As long as you walk in needing his approval to feel okay, you are still performing, just at a subtler level. Performing, not performing, while secretly monitoring whether it's landing, and he'll feel the monitoring the way he feels everything. True surrender means his reaction stops being the referendum on your value. You walk in already whole, already enough, already at home in yourself, so that whatever he does, lean in, pull back, choose you, don't. It lands on a woman who is solid, not on a woman whose entire sense of self is hanging on his next word. And paradoxically, unfairly almost, that woman, the one who doesn't need his verdict, is the one he can't stop wanting. Because there is nothing on earth more attractive than a person whose worth doesn't depend on you, and nothing less attractive than a person silently begging you to confirm they're enough. Now I have to give you the hardest truth in this entire video, the one that separates real surrender from the counterfeit. Because there is a counterfeit, and it will fool you if you're not warned. You cannot surrender as a technique. The moment you try to surrender in order to get him, you have not surrendered. You've just built a more sophisticated performance, the performance of surrender. And it fails exactly like every other performance because the man feels the calculation underneath it. There are women who hear all of this and think, brilliant. So being real is the new strategy. I'll perform realness. I'll act surrendered. I'll do the not performing thing because that's what works. And it does not work. It cannot work because the not performing is still in service of an outcome, still monitored, still managed, still a hand on the dial, and the animal in him feels the hand on the dial no matter how cleverly you disguise it as letting go. Real surrender requires you to actually release the outcome. For real, including the outcome of him falling in love with you. You have to genuinely arrive at the place where you would rather be alone and real than partnered and performing. Not as a manipulation, not as a paradoxical strategy where you pretend not to want it so you'll get it, but as an actual lived truth. You have to mean it. You have to have sat in the collapse long enough, survived the void completely enough, that being alone has genuinely stopped being the catastrophe it once was, so that you can walk into that room with a man you find magnificent and be fully willing to lose him, because you are no longer willing to win him by disappearing. That willingness is the thing. That's the unfakeable center of all of this. The woman who would rather be alone than perform is free in a way no performing woman has ever been, and her freedom is magnetic precisely because it's real, because it cannot be a strategy, because the second it becomes a strategy, it evaporates. She's not playing hard to get. She's genuinely fine either way, and a man can feel the difference between a woman performing indifference to manipulate him and a woman who is actually, peacefully, willing to walk away, and the first repels him and the second undoes him completely. So the surrender you're being asked for is not a clever move. It's the end of moves. It's the laying down of the entire apparatus of moves, and it's only available to you because of what came before. The collapse, the void, the discovery that the real you survives being seen. You couldn't have surrendered before that. You'd have had nothing to stand on. The surrender would have been a free fall into the terror of being unlovable. But now you've been to the bottom and found it solid. Now you know the real you can stand. So now, and only now, you can choose to send her into the room, undefended, willing to lose. And that willingness is not despair. It's the deepest self-possession there is. When you do this, something dies, and I won't rush past the dying, because the next movement is about grief, and the grief is real, and it deserves its own space. Because surrendering the performance means losing her, the woman you've been, the one who got you this far, the one who kept you safe. She has to die for the real you to live. And even though she was a mask, even though she was killing you slowly, she was also you for a long time, and you don't get to lose a version of yourself, even a false one, without grief. The women who try to skip the grief end up resurrecting the mask, because ungrieved things don't stay buried. So before we get to who you become, we have to honor who you're leaving behind. That's next. The grief of the woman you were. No one warns you that you'll grieve her. They tell you the mask is the enemy, the thing to drop, the prison to escape. And so, when you finally start to lose her, you're ambushed by sorrow, and the sorrow confuses you, because why would you mourn a cage? But you do. You grieve the performed woman the way you grieve anyone who carried you a long way and then had to be left behind. And if no one has told you this is coming, you'll mistake the grief for a sign you're doing it wrong, for evidence you should turn back, when it's actually the surest sign you're doing it right, because she was not your enemy. That's the thing the cheap advice gets wrong. Painting the mask as a villain to be destroyed. She was a child's brilliant solution to an impossible problem. She kept you safe when you had no other way to be safe. Every time you survived a room that wasn't safe for the real you, she's the one who got you through it. Every connection you did manage to keep, she helped you keep. She was loyal. She showed up every single day for decades, lifted herself to your face every morning, and walked you into the world, and took the hits so the soft, real you behind her wouldn't have to. She was wrong about a lot. She was killing you slowly, and she loved you in the only way she knew, which was to hide you so you couldn't be hurt. You do not get to set that down without weeping for it, and you shouldn't want to. So let yourself grieve her properly, because the women who refuse this step are the ones who relapse. Ungrieved things don't stay buried. If you try to amputate the performed self in a clean cold cut, telling yourself she was just a mask, no big deal, good riddance, she comes back, she rises up in the moment of maximum fear, on the date that matters most, with the man you most want, because she was never actually mourned and released, only suppressed, and suppression is just performance pointed inward. The only way she truly leaves is if you turn and face her and thank her and weep for her and let her go with honor. Grief is not the obstacle to her leaving. Grief is the door she leaves through. And there's more to grieve than just her. There's the time. This is the grief that catches women hardest, and I'm not going to soften it, because softening it is its own kind of lie. When you finally understand what the performance cost you, you have to face the years. The relationships you performed your way through, present for none of them. The man who might have loved the real you, who you sent the mask to instead, who fell for her, drifted from you, and you blamed yourself for the wrong thing for years. The decade, maybe two, of being loved in absentia, of winning a game whose prize was loneliness, of getting love delivered again and again to a woman who was never there to receive it. You have to grieve all of it. The intimacy you never got to have, the version of your life where you'd learn this at 20 instead of now, the sheer waste of all that effort, all that intelligence poured into the one thing guaranteed to keep you from what you wanted. That grief is heavy and it is fair, and you are allowed to feel the full weight of it. Do not let anyone, including the part of you that wants to rush to the happy ending, talk you out of mourning what the performance took. It took a lot. The years were real. The loneliness was real. The love you missed was real. And the only way through that grief is through it, not around it. Because grief you go around comes back as bitterness, as the cynical exit from the last movement. The woman who decides love is a fairy tale because she couldn't bear to feel what her own long deception had cost her. The ones who feel the grief all the way through come out clean. The ones who flinch from it come out armored, feel it all the way through. And then there's a grief almost no one names, the strangest one, and you have to be ready for it because it can knock you sideways. You will grieve the people who could only love the mask, because some of them, when you stop performing, will leave. Not all, but some. And there'll be people you cared about, friends, family, lovers, who were in relationship not with you, but with the performed you, who liked the easy one, who relied on the caretaker, who were comfortable with the version of you that asked for nothing and reflected them back and never made the room uncomfortable with a real need or a real no. When she goes, they lose the person they were actually in relationship with. And some of them won't be able to find their way to the real you, won't even try, will experience your realness as a betrayal, will accuse you of changing, of becoming difficult, of not being yourself, when the truth is the exact reverse. You become yourself for the first time, and they can't follow you there, because they were with you in the first place. They were with her. You have to grieve them, and the grief is complicated, because it's tangled with relief, and the two feel almost obscene together. There's relief, because you're free of relationships that required your absence, and there's real grief, because they were people you loved, in whatever distorted way the performance allowed, and losing them hurts. And the fact that the relationship was built on your erasure doesn't make the loss painless. It makes it more painful, because now you're grieving not just them, but the years you spent absent inside a connection you thought was real. The sample called this outgrowing people you loved, becoming incomprehensible to your former world. In love, it's sharper, because the people leaving aren't strangers. They're the ones who shaped you, And their departure is the final proof of what the mask always cost, that the love it earned was never yours to begin with. But here is what I need you to hold while you grieve all of this, because grief without this turns into despair, and despair is just another exit. Every loss in this grief is making room. The performed self has to die so the real one can live, and there is no version where you keep both. The years are gone, and grieving them is how you stop carrying them as shame and start carrying them as wisdom. Instead, the deep, hard-won knowing of exactly what performance costs, which is precisely the knowing that will keep you real for the rest of your life. And the people who could only love the mask, their leaving is not the catastrophe it feels like. It's the clearing. It's space opening up. It's the removal of everyone who required your absence, so that for the first time, there's room for someone to love your presence. You cannot be met by someone new while the space is full of people who can only relate to who you used to be. The grief is the emptying. And the emptying, terrible as it feels, is the precondition for everything you actually want. This is the sane paradox the sample lived inside, that the death is the liberation, that the dissolution is the womb, that what looks like loss is the necessary clearing for what's coming. In your love life, it's concrete. The mask dies, and you grieve her. And that grief is the price of getting your face back. The years are mourned, and the mourning turns waste into wisdom. The mask lovers leave, and their leaving is the room emptying out, so the real ones can finally walk in. Every single loss in this passage is a subtraction that makes an addition possible. And you cannot have the addition without the subtraction. That's the law. That's why you can't skip the grief. The grief is doing the actual work of clearing the ground. So weep for her, the performed woman who carried you here. Thank her for keeping you alive when you had no other way, and tell her it's over. The danger has passed. She can rest now. She doesn't have to lift herself to your face every morning anymore. You've got it from here. Weep for the years. Let them be heavy. Let them be fair. And then let them become the wisdom only someone who's wasted that much can have. Weep for the ones who could only love the mask, and let them go, and trust that their leaving is making room you can't yet see the use of. And when the grief has done its work, when you felt it all the way through instead of around, something will have shifted that you didn't engineer and can't fully describe. The crying will slow, the weight will change quality, from a stone you carry to a depth you contain. And you'll notice, almost shyly, that you feel lighter, not because you've forgotten what you lost, but because you finished mourning it. And finished mourning is finished in a way that suppression never is. The performed woman will be gone, really gone, grieved and released, and in the space where she stood, there'll be someone you haven't met in a very long time, someone who's been waiting behind her this whole time, since you were small, since before the first mask. You. And now we get to meet her, because she's not who you were afraid she'd be. The performance always told you the real you was the problem. Too much, not enough, unlovable, the very thing that had to be hidden. The performance was wrong about everything, but it was most wrong about this. So next we find out who she actually is, the woman under all the masks, and what changes in the whole world when she's finally the one who walks into the room. That's where we turn, from who you're leaving behind to who you become. Movement 8. What changes in you? She walks into a room differently, and that's the first thing you'll notice before you have words for any of it. The woman under the masks moves through the world at a different frequency, and you feel it in your own body before you understand it. A kind of settling, a lowering of the constant background hum you'd stopped even noticing because it had been running your whole life. The hum was vigilance. The performer was always on, always scanning, always calculating how she was coming across, and you'd mistaken that low electric anxiety for just being awake, for just being you. And then one day it's quieter, and the quiet is so unfamiliar that at first you think something's wrong, until you realize what's wrong is that nothing is, that you simply stopped monitoring yourself, that the surveillance has ended, and the silence where it used to be is what other people have apparently been living in this whole time. The first thing that changes is that you get yourself back as company. This sounds small, and it is enormous. For your entire performing life, you were never actually alone with yourself, because even alone, the performer was running, rehearsing, replaying, managing an image for an audience that wasn't even there. You'd never met the quiet of your own unobserved mind, and now you do, and you discover, to your genuine surprise, that you're decent company, that there's someone in there, that the self you spent decades hiding because you were certain she was unbearable is, it turns out, somebody you can actually stand to be alone with. Somebody with her own thoughts and tastes and weather, somebody real. The loneliness from the very beginning of this video, the specific loneliness of being loved in absentia, starts to close, not because a man arrived to fill it, but because you finally came home to the person who was always supposed to fill it, which was you. And this changes everything about how you walk toward love, because you're no longer walking toward it starving. That's the second thing, and it reorganizes your entire dating life. The performer was always hungry. She approached every man as a potential answer to a question she couldn't stop asking. Am I enough? Am I lovable? Will this one finally prove it? And the hunger leaked out of her no matter how well she hid it. The man could smell it. The neediness under the cool, the desperation under the strategy, the silent begging under the performance. You cannot hide hunger from a man's nervous system. Is one of the things it's most finely tuned to detect, because hunger means he's about to be asked to be someone's everything, someone's proof of their own worth, and that's a weight no one wants to carry, so he backs away, and you never understood why, because you'd hidden the hunger so well. You thought the woman who came home to herself is not hungry. Her worth was settled before she walked in the door, settled by her own relationship with herself, by the collapse she survived and the grief she completed, and the discovery that she can stand alone. So when she meets a man, she's not asking him to answer the question of whether she's enough, because that question is already answered by her permanently. She's just curious whether she enjoys him. The entire frame flips. She's not auditioning for his approval. She's evaluating whether he's worth her time. Not from arrogance, not from the performed indifference of the cool girl, but from the simple groundedness of a woman whose okayness does not hang on his response. And that exact quality is the most attractive thing a woman can carry into a room. And you'll watch it change how men respond to you almost immediately. And the change will be disorienting, because you'll have done nothing. You'll just have stopped being hungry. And stopping being hungry will turn out to have been the whole secret. These strategies were trying and failing to fake. The third thing that changes is your perception. You start to see men clearly for the first time because you stopped projecting onto them. Remember what was happening before. You were a surface, a mirror. And when you looked at a man, you were really looking at your own reflection in him, at how he made you feel about yourself, at whether he was validating you or threatening you. The whole encounter filtered through the desperate question of your own worth. You never saw him. You saw your hope or your fear wearing his face. And now that your worth is settled, the projection stops, the mirror clears, and you can actually look at the man in front of you and see him. the actual person, his realness and his performance, his depth and his shallowness, the parts of him that are solid and the parts that are still a mask. You develop almost overnight a startling clarity about men, an ability to read them that feels like a new sense. And it isn't a power you acquired, it's a blindness you lost, the blindness of self-obsession, and when it lifts, men become legible in a way they never were when you were too busy managing your reflection to look at them. This clarity is protective in a way the performance never was. The performer was endlessly fooled because she was looking at her own hope, so she missed the warning signs, mistook intensity for depth, mistook a man performing back at her for a man connecting with her, fell for masks because she was wearing one and couldn't see past her own. The woman who's come home sees the masks. She can tell early who's real and who's performing, who's available and who's running, who's capable of meeting her, and who's going to leave the moment she stops entertaining him. She stops wasting years on men who were never going to be able to receive her because she can see, almost from the first conversation, whether there's a real person under there willing to come out, and she no longer needs to find out the hard way over months at the cost of her heart. The fourth thing, and this is the one that completes her, is that she can hold opposites without collapsing. The performer could only hold one thing at a time, because each mask was a single note, agreeable or impressive or cool or indifferent, and any contradicting feeling had to be hidden because the mask couldn't contain it. The easy one couldn't be angry, the cool girl couldn't be openly tender, the impressive one couldn't be uncertain. Each role excluded half of human experience, and so the performer was always amputating part of herself to maintain the role, always less than whole. The woman who's integrated holds all of it at once. She can want a man deeply and be genuinely willing to walk away, both at the same time, no contradiction, and that combination, intense desire plus real freedom, is something the performer could never produce because she could only ever fake one or the other. She can be soft and have boundaries. She can be open and discerning. She can adore him and tell him no. She can be fully, warmly available and completely unwilling to disappear. And a man encountering this for the first time often doesn't know what's hit him because he spent his life meeting women who were one note. And here is a whole person, contradictions intact, nothing hidden, and the wholeness of her is the thing he's been unconsciously searching for since before he knew what he was looking for. This is the self-possession the cool girl was counterfeiting. And now you can see the difference clearly, lived from the inside. The cool girl performed indifference out of fear, hiding her interest so it couldn't be wounded. And the coldness was the whole apparatus, fragile, exhausting, a costume she could never take off. The integrated woman isn't indifferent at all. She's warm. She's openly interested. She's fully willing to be wounded. And that openness is only possible because her worth doesn't depend on the outcome. So the wound, if it comes, won't be fatal, just painful. And she can survive painful. The cool girl is armored because she can't survive the wound. The integrated woman is open because she can. And that's the whole difference between them. Invisible from outside, total from within. The difference between a woman protecting a fragile self and a woman who's discovered herself isn't fragile and never needs protecting again. And here's what I most need you to understand about all of this, because it's the hinge the entire video turns on. None of these changes were techniques you added. Every single one was a block you removed. You didn't acquire groundedness. You removed the hunger that was hiding it. You didn't acquire clarity about men. You removed the self-obsession that was blinding you. You didn't acquire the ability to hold opposites. You removed the masks that were amputating you. The woman who emerges from this process is not a more advanced performer with better techniques. She's the real you, the factory setting you, the one broadcasting at full volume before the world taught her to manage it, finally allowed back into the room, plus everything you survived, minus the mask. She was always there. She was always who men were actually hoping would come to the door. You just had her in hiding, and now she's out. And out is a state, not a skill, which is exactly why no technique could ever produce it, and no technique can take it away. So that's who you become. Now the question that's been waiting since the title, the one you came here for. What happens to him? Because you've changed fundamentally, and the man across from you is no longer meeting the performer. He's meeting her, the real one, the whole one, and something happens in a man when he meets a woman who isn't performing that does not happen any other way. Something that no amount of ego stroking ever produced. Something that is the actual answer to the question you came in asking. That's next. What changes in how you see him? And then, finally, what changes in him? Movement 9. What changes in how you see him? Before we get to what happens inside him, you have to learn to see him, because you never really have, and the seeing is the thing that does the work. This is the part the title promised under a false name. Stroking his ego was never the secret. Seeing him was. And seeing a man is not a technique you perform on him, it's a capacity that opens in you once you've stopped performing, and it changes him precisely because it's not aimed at changing him. So look at him, actually look, the way you couldn't before, when all your attention was spent on your own reflection. There is a man in front of you, and he is carrying something. And once your own vision clears, you start to see the weight of it, the thing every man carries and almost never gets to set down. He has been performing his whole life, too. That's the first thing you see when you can finally see, and it reorganizes your entire understanding of men. You thought you were the only one in a costume. You weren't. He's been in one since he was a small boy who got taught in 1,000 ways that his softness was a liability, that needing things made him weak, that fear was shameful and tears were dangerous, and the only acceptable man was the strong one, the competent one, the one who has it handled and never asks for help. He learned to perform that man. He's been performing him for decades. The composure, the competence, the easy confidence, the I'm fine, the I've got it, and underneath the performance is someone tired, someone uncertain, someone who has been carrying it all alone and would genuinely rather die than let it show, because showing it, he learned long ago, is how a man loses everything. You and he are the same animal. That's what you see when you finally see him. Two people who learned young that the real self was unsafe, who built a mask to survive, who've been performing ever since, each of you lonely inside your costume, each of you starving to be met, each of you certain you're the only one hiding. You spent your whole dating life seeing men as the audience you performed for, the judges of your worth, the prize to be won. And now you see them as fellow prisoners, fellow performers, fellow exiles from their own real selves. And the moment you see that, something in you softens toward him that has nothing to do with strategy, a recognition, one prisoner spotting another, and that recognition is the beginning of the thing he's been waiting his whole life for. Now watch for the second thing, the harder thing to see, because it's the thing his performance is most designed to hide. Watch for the moments his mask slips. They're small and they're fast, and the performing woman missed every one of them because she was busy with her own mask. A flicker of uncertainty under the confidence. A beat of something tender that he covers immediately with a joke. A real feeling that surfaces for half a second before the competent man clamps back down over it. A moment where he says something true, accidentally more vulnerable than he meant to be. And you watch him brace, watch him wait to see if you'll punish it the way the world taught him it gets punished. These slips are the man underneath, surfacing for an instant, testing the water, checking whether it's safe to come out, and every man is doing this constantly, all the time, sending up these tiny flares of his real self to see if anyone's there to receive them, and almost no one ever is, because almost everyone he meets is too busy performing back at him to notice the flare go up. The woman who's come home notices. That's her power. And it isn't a power she wields, it's a presence she has. She's not performing, so her attention is free. So she catches the slip, the flicker, the half second of realness, and she does the thing almost no one in his life has ever done. She doesn't punish it. She doesn't flinch from it. She doesn't make it weird or pull back or lose respect for him or use it against him later. She just receives it warmly, like it's welcome, like it's the most natural thing in the world for him to be real. And in that moment, something happens in him that I'll describe fully in the next movement. But you need to understand the mechanism now, because the mechanism is the whole answer to the question you came in with. He falls in love in the gap between his slip and your response. That's where it happens. Not in your beauty, not in your wit, not in anything you perform. In the specific instant when his real self surfaces, uninvited, and braces for rejection and instead meets acceptance. That gap, that half second where he's exposed and waiting for the punishment that always came before, and the punishment doesn't come. Instead, there's warmth. There's a woman looking at the real him without leaving. That gap is where every deep love a man has ever felt was born. It is the exact thing he's been searching for his entire life. The thing the anima projection was always reaching toward. The thing no flattery ever gave him, because flattery praises the mask, and what he needs is for someone to meet the face. And you can only give it to him if you can see the slip, and you can only see the slip if you stopped performing, which is why this was never available to the woman in the mask, no matter how perfectly she ran the strategy. So seeing him is not passive. It's the most active thing there is, and it's the actual content of everything the title was clumsily pointing at. You're not stroking his ego. The ego is the mask, and stroking it just welds it tighter. You're doing the opposite of stroking his ego. You're seeing past the ego to the man under it and welcoming that man out, and the welcome is what he falls for. Because the welcome is what he's been starving for since he was a boy who learned to hide. And here's the part that protects you, because seeing clearly cuts both ways, and you need both edges. When you can see his slips, you can also see whether there's a real man under there willing to come out, or whether the mask goes all the way down. Because not every man, when offered the welcome, will accept it. Some have been performing so long, so completely, that they've lost the man underneath, or buried him so deep they can't find him, or are too frightened to risk him even when safety is offered. You'll send up the welcome and watch him not take it. Watch him stay behind the competence. Watch him keep performing even when the door is wide open, and you'll know with the clarity you've earned that this one can't meet you, not won't, can't, not yet, maybe not ever. And you'll be able to walk away without years of trying to coax out a man who isn't ready to come out, because you can see the difference between a man who slips lefty. This is the discernment the performer never had. She couldn't tell available from unavailable, real from performed, ready from frozen, because she was wearing her own mask and projecting her own hope, and could only ever see her reflection. The woman who's come home sees the actual man, sees whether he's reachable, and chooses accordingly, which means she stops the central tragedy of her old love life, the years spent pouring herself into men who were never going to be able to receive her. She offers the welcome. She watches what he does with it, and she reads the answer correctly. And that reading saves her the heartbreak the performer walked into again and again because she literally could not see it coming. So you see him as a fellow performer, which softens you. You see his slips, which lets you welcome him. And you see whether the welcome lands, which protects you. 3 kinds of seeing, all of them opened by the same thing, the laying down of your own mask, none of them available while you were still performing. And the first 2, the softening and the welcome, are the entire mechanism by which a man falls deeply in love. Not the false mechanism, the title named, the real one, the one that actually works, the one no strategy can fake because it requires a presence. No strategy can fake because it requires a presence no strategy can produce. Which brings us finally to him, to what actually happens inside a man when he meets a woman who sees him like this, who isn't performing, who catches his slip and welcomes the real him out and means it. Because it is not a small thing. It is the thing he has been waiting for his whole life without knowing its name, and when it finally arrives, it undoes him in a way that flattery never could, and the ego stroking the world sold you never even approached. That's the payoff. That's the answer to the question under the title. That's next. So here is what actually happens inside a man when he meets a woman who isn't performing. This is the answer to the question under the title, and it has nothing to do with stroking his ego. And once you understand it, you'll never be fooled by the cheap version again. For his entire life, every form of attention he's received has been aimed at his mask. The admiration, the praise, the women impressed by his success, the people drawn to his confidence, all of it landed on the competent man, the performed man, the one he built to be acceptable. And every time it landed there, it confirmed the same quiet despair he's carried since boyhood, that he is loved for the performance, that the real him, the tired one, the uncertain one, the one who's afraid he's not enough, would never survive being seen, that he must keep performing forever or lose everything. He has organized his whole life around this belief. He has never once tested it, because testing it felt like suicide, like handing someone the knife. So he performs and gets admired and stays starving, exactly the way you did, 2 prisoners in 2 costumes, each certain they're the only one inside, and then he meets you, the woman who's come home to herself. And you're not performing, and your attention is free, and you catch his slip, the flicker of the real man under the competent one, and instead of the punishment he's braced for his whole life, instead of the flinch, the pullback, the loss of respect, there's warmth. There's a woman looking directly at the part of him he's spent decades hiding, and she's not leaving. She's not even surprised. She's welcoming it like it's the most natural thing in the world, like the real him is exactly who she was hoping would show up. What happens in him in that moment is not attraction. It's something older and larger than attraction. It's relief so profound it borders on grief. It's the sensation of setting down a weight he's carried so long he forgot it was a weight, forgot that other people might not be carrying it, forgot there was any version of being alive that didn't involve the constant low labor of holding the mask in place. For one moment with you, he doesn't have to hold it. Someone has seen underneath and stayed. And a man will reorganize his entire life around the person who gives him that, not because you've manipulated him, but because you've given him the one thing the whole performing world never could, which is permission to exist as himself. And that permission is so rare and so precious that the part of him capable of love, the deep part, the part the anima was always reaching from, fixes on you with a totality that no flattery has ever produced or ever yet. This is why ego stroking fails and always failed. When you stroke his ego, you pour attention onto the mask, and every drop of it confirms his despair, tells him you've fallen for the act, tells him the real him still has to stay hidden, tells him you're one more person he has to keep performing for. your flattery, however lavish, however skilled, says to the deepest part of him, I do not see you, I see the costume, and I like the costume, so keep it on. And no man falls deeply in love with a woman he has to keep the costume on around, because the costume is exhausting and lonely, and the love that lands on it can never reach him. You were taught to do the precise thing that guarantees he stays at arm's length, and you were taught to call it the secret to his heart. The actual secret is the opposite. You make a man fall deeply in love, not by feeding his mask, but by making it safe for him to take it off. Not by admiring his strength, but by being unafraid of his weakness. Not by performing for his ego, but by being so at home in yourself that he can finally stop performing for yours. The deepest love a man is capable of is reserved always for the person in whose presence he gets to be real, because being real is the thing he wants most and gets to do least, and whoever gives it to him becomes irreplaceable, not because they tricked him, but because they freed him. And here's the part that should lay the old strategy to rest forever. This kind of love is loyal in a way the performance-based kind never is. The man who falls for your mask is always on some level restless, because the mask can be matched. Another woman can perform the same role, run the same strategy, be a little younger or a little more impressive, and he can feel that. He can feel that what he's attached to is a performance, and performances are replaceable. So he keeps one eye on the door. But the man who falls because you let him be real is anchored because what he's attached to cannot be found anywhere else. He's not in love with a role another woman could play. He's in love with the specific experience of being seen and welcomed by you, with the relief of setting the weight down in your presence, and that is not replaceable. That is not a role. That is the rarest thing in his life, and he knows it, and he holds on to it the way a man holds on to. One place he gets to breathe. The performer was always afraid of being replaced because she was offering something replaceable. The woman who's come home is unreplaceable because she's offering the one thing no other woman can counterfeit, which is the freedom to stop performing, which she can only give because she stopped performing herself. So the title had it exactly backwards, and now you see the whole shape of the lie. There is no stroking his ego. The ego is the wall. You don't make him love you by reinforcing the wall. You make him love you by being safe enough that he dares to come out from behind it, and he can only do that with a woman who's come out from behind hers. Two people setting down their masks at the same time. That's the only thing that's ever produced the love you came here wanting. Everything else is two costumes, sharing a room, mistaking proximity for intimacy, wondering why it stays cold. That's the payoff. That's what changes in him. Now let's put it on the ground, because all of this is abstract until you're sitting across from an actual man on an actual Tuesday, and the real test isn't whether you understand it. It's whether you can live it when your heart is pounding and every old instinct is screaming at you to put the mask back on. Movement 11. How it plays out in real life. None of this matters until it survives contact with a real man on a real night, when your heart is pounding and the old reflexes come roaring back, because they will come roaring back. And the first thing you have to know is that the masks don't vanish just because you understood them. Understanding is movement one of the work. Living it under pressure is the whole rest of your life. So let's get concrete about what this actually looks like, because abstraction is comfortable and the ground is where it counts. It starts before any man with how you spend your time alone, because the groundedness that makes all of this possible is not summoned on the date. It's built in the days between. The woman who can walk in unhungry built her fullness elsewhere, in a life that's actually hers, work that means something, friendships that are real, solitude she's made peace with, a relationship with herself solid enough that a man becomes an addition to a full life, rather than the missing piece of an empty one. This is not a dating tip, it's the foundation under all the dating tips, because a woman with an empty life cannot help being hungry, and a woman with a full one cannot help being grounded, and the man feels which one walked in before either of you says a word. So the real work happens when no man is watching. Build the life. The dates take care of themselves once the life is real. Then comes the moment itself. And here's where you'll catch the mask reaching for your face in real time, and catching it is the entire practice. You're on the date, and he says something, and you feel the easy one reach for. It's fine when it isn't fine. And now, because you've named her, there's a gap, a half second where you notice the reach before it completes. In that gap is everything. You can let the mask come up the old automatic way, or you can do the frightening new thing, which is to say the true thing instead. Actually, that did bother me. Or, I'd rather do the other place. Or, I don't agree. Small truths, the smallest, and they will feel enormous. They will feel like cliff edges, because every one of them is the real you stepping into the room where only the mask was ever allowed, and your whole nervous system will brace for the punishment that taught you to perform in the first place. And here is what you'll discover, the thing that slowly rewires you, date by date, truth by truth. The punishment usually doesn't come. You say the small true thing, the thing the mask existed to prevent, and the man doesn't leave, doesn't recoil, doesn't withdraw the love. Most of the time he leans in, because you just became real, because you just handed him an actual person to relate to, instead of a smooth surface, and the relief of that registers in him even if he couldn't name it. Each time this happens, the child who learned that realness costs love gets a piece of evidence that the danger has passed, that this is now, not then, that being herself does not end the connection. You cannot give her that evidence by reasoning with her. You can only give it to her by doing the frightening thing and letting her watch the catastrophe not happen over and over until the old wiring finally loosens its grip. Now, boundaries, because this is where it gets real and where the performer is most terrified, since boundaries were the exact thing her whole strategy was built to avoid. A boundary is the clearest possible statement that you are a real person with a center, and the easy one was constructed precisely to have no center anyone could bump into. So when you start setting boundaries, telling a man what you will and won't accept, what you need, what doesn't work for you, every alarm in your body goes off, because you're certain this is the thing that makes him leave. And here's the truth you have to live to believe, because no one can argue you into it. The right man does not leave when you set a boundary. He relaxes. A boundary tells him you're a real person, that your yes means something because your no is possible, that he's relating to an actual someone with edges and not a placeless surface that agrees with everything. Boundaries are not the opposite of intimacy. They're the precondition for it, because there's no one to be intimate with until there's a self with a shape, and a boundary is the shape becoming visible. And the men who do leave when you set a boundary, this is the part you have to let yourself learn the hard, clean way they were leaving anyway. They were attached to the performance, to the woman with no needs and no edges and no center. And the moment a real person showed up with a real limit, they lost the thing they were actually attached to, which was your absence. Their leaving is not your boundary failing. It's your boundary working, doing exactly the job it's for, which is to clear out everyone who could only love you while you weren't there. It will hurt. The grief from earlier comes back here, in real time, as actual men actually leave. But everyone who leaves over a boundary is a man who was never going to be able to meet you, and his departure is the room emptying out, again, making space again for the one who can. Let's talk about the texture of the right one's leaning in, because you need to recognize it when it comes, since you've spent so long in the counterfeit that the real thing might not look like what you expect. It's quieter than the performed high. The mask attraction was electric, fast, intense, the projection firing, the infatuation spiking, and it always curdled. You knew that pattern intimately. The real thing comes in lower and steadier. It feels less like a drug and more like a deepening, less like being swept away and more like being slowly, increasingly seen. And if you're used to the spike, you might at first mistake the steadiness for a lack of chemistry, might worry it's not exciting enough, might miss it. Don't. The steadiness is the sign it's real. The performed high was high because it was unstable. The steadiness is steady because there's actually something there. Learn the new texture. It's the texture of love that lasts, and it will feel unfamiliar precisely because everything that lasted was always going to feel different from everything that didn't. You'll also have to manage the men who try to pull you back into the performance, and some will, often without knowing it. A man who is drawn to the easy one may push against your new boundaries, may call you difficult, may try through 1,000 small pressures to get the agreeable surface back, because that's who he signed up for. A man who, like the mirror, may be disoriented when you stop reflecting him and start being a separate person with your own takes. You'll feel the pull to comply, to smooth it over, to put the mask back on just this once to keep the peace. And that pull is the old wiring, and the answer is to hold, gently, without defending or explaining too much, just to stay yourself and let him adjust or let him go. Don't over-explain. Your realness is not a thing you owe anyone an argument for. The right man adjusts. The wrong man leaves. Either way, you stay whole, and staying whole is the only thing that was ever going to work. And protect your energy, because you're more porous now, more available, more real, and that openness is a strength that needs tending. The performer was armored and felt nothing all the way through. The woman who's come home feels everything, which is what makes her present, and what makes her magnetic, and also what makes her need real solitude to refill, real boundaries around her time, real care for the nervous system that's now doing the brave work of staying open instead of the exhausting work of staying armored. This is not the cool girl's performed unavailability, it's actual self-care, the genuine tending of a genuinely open person, and it's not a strategy to seem mysterious. It's the maintenance that keeps the openness sustainable, because openness without replenishment burns out and collapses back into armor. And you didn't come this far to re-armor. One more practical truth, the hardest. You'll fail. You'll have nights where the man matters too much, and the fear wins, and the mask goes up, and you drive home knowing you performed the whole evening, and you'll feel like you've undone all of it, like you're back at the start. You're not. The difference between the old you and the new you is not that the new you never performs. It's that the new you knows when she's doing it, feels the cost, and finds her way back. Relapse is not failure. It's part of the process. The wiring is decades deep, and it does not release all at once. And the work is not to never put the mask up again. The work is to catch it sooner each time, to come back faster, to spend more of your life as yourself and less in costume, until the balance tips and yourself becomes the default and the mask becomes the rare exception you reach for, under extreme threat instead of the Be patient with her. The woman learning this, she's unlearning a lifetime. She's allowed to stumble, so that's the ground. Build the full life when no one's watching. Catch the mask in the gap and choose the small true thing. Set the boundary and let it sort the real men from the mask lovers. Learn the quieter texture of love that lasts. Hold against the pull back into performance. Tend the openness and forgive the relapses and come back. Do this, not perfectly, just persistently, and the woman who's come home becomes the woman you simply are, and the love that finds her finds the actual you, which is the only love that was ever going to reach you. Which leaves one thing left to say. Who you'll become at the end of all this, not on any single date, but as a whole life, and what it means that you walked through the fire instead of around it. That's the last turn. That's where we land. Movement 12. Who you become and the cloche. So here you are on the other side, and the question that's left is the one that was underneath the whole video, underneath even the title. Not how do you make a man fall in love. Who have you become that love now finds you instead of fleeing you? You're not a better performer. That's the first thing to say plainly, because some part of you even now is tempted to file all of this as a more advanced strategy, the realness technique, the not performing move. It isn't. You didn't learn a better way to perform. You stopped performing. You're not the same woman running an upgraded program. You're a fundamentally different woman. The way the sample said, caterpillar and butterfly, same DNA, completely different expression. And the difference is not that you've added anything, it's that you finally stopped subtracting yourself. For your entire adult life, you walked into rooms as less than you were, edited, managed, costumed. And now you walk in as the whole thing. And the wholeness is not a skill you mastered, it's a hiding you ended. There's a coherence to you now that you couldn't have forced, and you'll feel it most in the small moments, the ones that used to take effort and now take none. A man asks what you think, and you just tell him no calculation, no scan for the answer that lands best. Just the true thing, easily, because there's no longer a gap between the woman having the thought and the woman saying it out loud. You want something, and you say so. Something bothers you, and you name it. You're attracted to a man, and you let it show, openly, unafraid, because your worth no longer hangs on whether he's attracted back. The exhausting translation layer is gone, the one that used to sit between your real reaction and your performed response, converting everything you actually felt into something safer to show. You feel a thing and you express the thing. That's all. And that directness, which costs you nothing now, is the very thing that took everything before. And men feel the difference between a woman translating herself and a woman simply being herself, the way they feel the difference between a recording and a live voice in the room. You carry a quiet confidence that has nothing to prove, and this is the thing people will notice without being able to name it. You're not trying to convince anyone of anything anymore, not trying to seem impressive or easy or cool or desirable. You stopped auditioning for men, for everyone, and the relief of that has settled into your body as a kind of stillness, a groundedness, a sense that you're allowed to take up space simply because you exist, not because you've earned it through performance. People feel safe around this. They relax. They tell you things. And men, specifically, find it almost unbearable in the best way, because they've spent their lives among people auditioning, including themselves. And a woman who stopped auditioning is so rare that being near her feels like coming up for air. And here's the deepest reversal of the whole journey, the one that pays off everything. The thing you were terrified of, being alone, the catastrophe the whole performance existed to prevent, turns out to be the exact thing that frees you to be loved. Because you went down into the collapse, and you sat in the void, and you discovered you could survive being alone, being unperformed, being just yourself, with nothing to offer but yourself. And that discovery is what lets you walk toward any man without the hunger that used to repel them. You're not desperate for him to choose you, because you already know you'll be okay if he doesn't. And that, precisely that, is what makes him desperate to be chosen by you. The willingness to be alone is the thing that ends the aloneness. You had to genuinely stop needing the love, to become the woman the love finally reaches. There's no way to fake your way past this, no shortcut around it, no technique that skips it, because the freedom is the whole point, and the freedom is only real if you actually arrived at it down there in the void, when you found out you'd survive. You can't unknow this now. That's the grief folded inside the gift, the same one the sample named. You can't go back to performing, not really. Even when you're scared, even when you relapse, because you've seen behind it now, you know what it costs and you know what's possible without it. And the comfortable old lie that the mask was protecting you is permanently broken. There's a loss in that. The loss of the simpler time when you believed the strategy could save you, when you could still hope the next refinement would fix everything. That hope is gone. But what replaced it is so much larger. The knowledge that you don't need a strategy, that you were never the problem, that the real you, the one you spent decades hiding, was always the only thing that was going to work. You traded a false hope for a true freedom, and you'd never trade back, even though the false hope was easier to carry. And the love, when it comes, and it comes differently for everyone, on no schedule you can force, the love lands on the actual you. That's the entire point of all of it, and it's worth saying as plainly as it can be said. For the first time in your life, when a man loves you, the love reaches you, because you're actually there to receive it. No more love delivered to the wrong address. No more being chosen in absentia. No more standing beside a man who adores a woman you invented, feeling the specific loneliness of being unmet inside, being loved. The love comes home because you came home first, and it finds you there, the real you, and it holds, because what it's holding onto is real, and real things hold. The loneliness, from the very first words of this video, the one that brought you here, the one nobody warned you about, that loneliness ends, not because someone arrived to fill you, but because you stopped sending an empty costume to collect a love you were never present for. Here is what I want you to take, above everything else, the thing to keep when the rest fades. You were never unlovable. That was the lie under all of it, the lie the child believed when the love got withdrawn, the lie the child believed when the love got withdrawn, the lie that ran your whole love life from the dark. You were never too much or not enough or fundamentally wrong. You were a person who learned young that being herself was unsafe, and who built something brilliant to survive that, and whose brilliant survival strategy then became the very thing standing between her and the love she was strategizing to get. You didn't have a worthiness problem. You had a hiding problem, and hiding problems are solvable in a way worthiness problems are not, because all a hiding problem requires is the courage to stop. And you, by getting all the way to the end of this, have already shown you have that courage in you. There's no technique to remember, and that's the final freedom. You can let go of the whole exhausting project of figuring out what to do to him, because there's nothing to do to him. There's only the woman to become, and becoming her is not a performance you sustain. It's a hiding you, and an ended hiding doesn't take maintenance. It just takes the ongoing, daily, imperfect courage to keep choosing the real thing over the safe thing, to catch the mask in the gap and set it down, to say the small true thing, to let the openness stay open. Not perfectly, persistently. That's the only practice, and it's not really a practice, it's just becoming, slowly, undeniably, the person you already were before the world taught you to hide her. The men worth having will fall for that woman, deeply the way no one ever fell for the performer, because she's giving them the one thing the performer never could, the freedom to stop performing too. Two people setting down their masks at the same time in the same room, meeting at last as themselves. That's the love you came here wanting. It was never going to come from stroking his ego. It was always going to come from the courage to take off your own mask and to be safe enough, whole enough, home enough in yourself that he dares to take off his. So take it off, not as a strategy, not to get him. Take it off because you're tired of being loved in absentia, tired of the second job of being someone you're not, tired of the specific loneliness of winning a love that can never reach you. Take it off because the real you has been waiting behind it since you were small, and she deserves to be the one who walks into the room, and she deserves to be the one a man finally meets, and she deserves the love that only she can receive. Welcome her out. She's who he's been looking for the whole time. She's who you've been the whole time. She's who you've been the whole time. And the moment you let her come to the door, everything you were trying to force begins, quietly, on its own, to arrive. If this reached something in you that the strategies never touched, stay with this work. In the comments, if you feel moved to, name one mask you recognized as yours, because naming it is how it loosens, and your honesty gives the next person permission to be honest too. The next video goes deeper into the part that comes after. How to stay yourself once you've found her, in a world that will keep trying, gently and constantly, to talk you back into the costume. Until then, stop performing. Let yourself be met. You were always enough for the love you wanted. You just had to stop hiding long enough to let it find you.